Welcome everybody to this evening's discussion. As we all know, change is in the air. There is a new air ordinance, and we're being told that it's going to bring in hopefully clean air for our lungs. It's going to have a lot of teeth. It's going to be a body which has jurisdiction over Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh. It's going to affect the national capital region and its air. But what does it actually mean in real terms? Is it going to usher in a new era of governance when it relates to clean air, or is it just old wine in a new bottle? So here to shed some light on what this new air ordinance is going to be and how hopefully it will, involve change for the better or not, we're going to be discussing today with our panel. We have with us Chetan Bhattacharji. He's the governing board member of Care for Air. He's also the managing editor with NDTV. Chetan, welcome.
Thanks.
We have with
Thanks for
us
the invite.
Welcome. We have with us Shibani Ghosh. She's a fellow at the Center for Policy Research. Shibani, you're also a lawyer, so it would be good to get your, to get you to weigh in on the legal aspects of this ordinance. And we will be joined shortly by Ritwick Dutta, who's the founder of the Legal Initiative for Environment. He's also an environment lawyer practicing in the National Green Tribunal and the Supreme Court. Ritwick is stuck in traffic, but he should be joining us soon. Now, as I've already introduced, the center has brought in a new ordinance. What is going to be the impact of this ordinance, and is it going to usher in some change? I'd like some opening remarks. Shibani, let's start with you. What sense do you make of the new air ordinance? Are you optimistic that it's going to lead to change?
Right. Thank you, Bahar, and thank you, sir, for. I hope I'm loud and okay. Great.
Yes.
Organizing this this webinar. I think it's really important that we start kind of unpacking this issue, because the ordinance is likely the way it's laid out, the kind of powers and functions the commission is supposed to have. I think it could have a real impact and a very wide impact. So I think it's important we kind of understand those functions and duties and kind of see where this is going. Now, first and foremost, I mean, for all of us on this webinar, obviously this ordinance came almost out of the blue in a sense, in the form that it is. We did have a sense that the center is going to come up with a new law, because the Solicitor General had made a statement before the Supreme Court last week. But the sense we got from that statement was that, they're going to come up with a draft law, and then one was hopeful for some form of public consultation, and that towards the end of the year, there was also some talk of an ordinance, but none of us knew. By the next date of hearing, the president already promulgated the ordinance. Now, what this ordinance does, very briefly, is set up this new commission, which will almost have, and this I think is one of the crucial bits of the ordinance, is what it's called an exclusive jurisdiction. So, I mean, every other authority, body, organization, any individual who is working in the area of air pollution and I stress on this, in the National Capital Region and in adjoining areas, and we can come to the definition of adjoining areas in just a bit, those bodies, authorities, in a sense, can no longer exercise jurisdiction. And that, of course, leads to many questions of interinstitutional conflict. How does this new body engage with these bodies and existing laws, regulations, and all? But this exclusive jurisdiction that has been given to the commission is something that that's really the primary output, if I call it, of this ordinance. The second thing is that it's created this new commission, and of course we all have heard of the EPCA or the EPCA headed by Mr. Burelal, which had been functioning for the last 22 odd years. The commission, first and foremost, replaces the EPCA. The EPCA, as of 28th October, no longer exists because the ordinance came into force. The commission, there is no body as of now. There's a law that has set up the commission. The central government is yet to notify the commission who will head it, who will be part of the commission. But if we look at the list of members, it's about 17 members plus the chairperson. It's predominantly of course, predominantly bureaucrats, but also within that there is a majority of the central government. There are the kind of, if you were comparing with EPCA, one big thing is that they're going to be full-time members, which EPCA did not have. But again, those full-time members are from the government, but 3 technical members, we don't know who they are. Only thing we know is they're supposed to have the scientific kind of background. So yet again, people from any other background who may have expertise in the area of air quality, whether it's health, public health, medicine, social sciences, that actually, at least the ordinance doesn't refer to them as qualifications for technical members. Interestingly, there is no, even in the associate membership, no representation from health, no representation from labor. It's all very much petroleum, commerce and industry, all these kinds of folks. Also, very little participation from people outside the government. 3 NGOs could have representatives on the commission, but apart from that, this whole ordinance, if we look at it, in terms of putting in place a deliberative process, doesn't really do much. The third thing is about the overriding kind of jurisdiction that this commission has been given. And this is kind of an important legal technicality here, that in case of a conflict between something that the state governments have said, or the state pollution control boards have said, or the central pollution control board, anyone other than the central government, and something that this commission says, the ordinance outright says that the commission will have the overriding power. So what if there's a conflict between that, the commission is kind of in a hierarchy, as it were, above state governments as well as these pollution control boards as they exist. The other thing that and because this is opening remarks, just to kind of is, there's a talk about is about the enforcement powers of this commission. So like the EPCA, it has the power to entertain complaints, but we know EPCA didn't really do that. But the power remains now whether to hear suo motu or any complaints filed by individuals or authorities. Incidentally, it doesn't seem like government agencies themselves can file complaints from the letter of the law, but that's something we could talk about. So the complaint procedure, perhaps the rules and regulations will tell us how that would work. But the commission has the power to hear and decide these complaints. And what the commission can do later on is issue directions, orders. But in terms of actually, the penalty mechanism is only triggered when the commission goes to the judicial magistrate first class, which is a criminal court. And therefore, that will require the commission to actually pursue a criminal prosecution. That, as we all know, has not really taken the Air Act or the EPCA. National Criminal Records Bureau data of the last several years shows that under the Air Act and the Environment Protection Act, criminal convictions have been almost single digits or not at all. So the ordinance yet again makes the criminal prosecution a primary enforcement tool, which is problematic in many ways, because we haven't seen that deterring polluters earlier. Our experience in that sense hasn't been very well. Just to wrap up, I think in terms of recognizing an air shed, that the pollution is a regional problem, I think in that sense, perhaps the ordinance is in the right direction, but only to that limited sense, because the adjoining areas almost are treated as contributors to the polluters, but not as victims of pollution. But unfortunately, the way the ordinance is laid out, it just seems that institutional coordination was the only problem, whereas there are so many other problems, parts of the puzzle when we want to resolve air pollution. I think those have taken a back seat. And yet again, as we see, NCR is somehow treated as a very different, in a very different level from the rest of the country, which has so many, is suffering from equally, if not more severe pollution problems. So I'll stop here. And of course, as we open up for questions and discussion, I'll be happy to jump in.
Thank you so much, Shibani. I think you made some really useful points, especially, a lot of us as individuals, as citizens, we don't understand the full legal ramifications of this. I think you made very interesting points regarding exclusive jurisdiction, regarding the fact that there are a couple of members who should have been represented, for instance, whether it's from the Labor Department or the Health Department. So I think those are very valid issues. If I can just ask you that on a positive note, what would you say is, if you compare it to EPCA, the one point where you feel this particular air ordinance takes a step forward compared to EPCA?
If I just had to choose one, Bahar, I would say the fact that it has full-time membership, and there is a specific provision for appointing officers and employees who will be the secretariat of this commission, because I think that was one major problem with EPCA, which was almost functioning on a part-time basis.
Right.
So apart from ex officio members, the fact that it has full-time members, technical members, and is likely to have a staff, and the fact that that's a positive also makes it important that actually comes through, the commission is not left kind of standing without those officers and those employees and appointments not being made.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for keeping that optimistic, because I think right now the mood is such, given our lungs and given how bad the air is, I think it's important to hear some positive things. But of course, we will deep dive into what's missing, what went wrong with EPCA, and how perhaps, this ordinance could help clean up our air. Chetan, if I can get you in at this point, not just as a media person, but as somebody, who's a citizen, you're representing a citizens group. Are you hopeful, having seen the new air ordinance? Do you think the government is finally getting its act together? Is this a step in the right direction?
Thanks, Bahar, and thanks, Shibani. I think that was a really fine legal dissection that you did. Coming to this, I just got a few notes that I had made. But I don't think anyone expects us to be a silver bullet, right? I think that's been covered in the writings and the initial reactions that a lot of people have come up with. Nobody expects blue skies next October, November. At first glance, this is more on enforcement. So I think that's a good thing, and it covers a jurisdiction from Amritsar to Varanasi. EPCA was just about, perhaps about 24 districts or so. So that's a good thing. The enforcement area, as Shibani pointed out, there is also a standing secretariat, a fixed team, which also includes 5 IGPs, if I recall correctly, who will be handling the policing, the enforcement in their particular areas, in their particular states. Overall, I think I am a bit optimistic of this, because I think, well, more than optimistic, I think the word would be pragmatic, because this is a step up from what we've seen so far, right? We've had EPCA, we've had a bunch of state pollution control bodies. They will continue, of course. Pollution hasn't really gone down in the last 5, 6, 7 years. We are told by every successive government, by every successive year, that pollution has gone down by 10, 20, 30%. But, we just have to ask our children. We see the kind of, ask any parent who's giving steroid puffs to their kids. Has pollution really gone down? Is it really less? And they will tell you that it's not. So, the government trying to reassure us, or through whatever political motive, say that it's gone down. As people, as citizens, as parents, we know that it's not going down. So I think as an emergency response, it is a welcome step. But as an emergency response, I mean, the emergency has been there for 6, 7 years. And what has happened is that this came in a very, the issues that I have with it is that it came in a very stealth, in a very secret way, right? It was just announced one day in court. Nobody saw it coming, for something which is of such great importance and great importance to public health. There should have been some discussion, as Shibani also pointed out. So what exactly was the motive behind this? Why was it done in such a way that even the cabinet did not clear it, right? The Prime Minister cleared it, and I think the cabinet will clear it in a couple of days or in a couple of weeks or something like that. What was the reason for this urgency? Now, if you compare it to the other landmark policy that came out last year, the National Clean Air Program, was that what it was called? Yeah, National Clean Air Program. There was a year of consultation. At the end of it, and it was very good, right? It was really thorough, and the document is pretty good, but it's a toothless document. There's no legal enforcement of it. That had a year of consultation. This had nothing. This was just by stealth, and overnight, the ordinance says at once this commission will come into force. But 5 days later, there's no commission in sight, right? So what exactly is at play? Why is there no transparency? I think that is something that civil society groups such as, meetings such as this and various other fora should put forward what exactly is the thinking behind this. Um, on the positive side, I would also mention that I would actually have liked to see, given the kind of powers that it has, and given that I broadly think it's a step in the right direction, a wider jurisdiction. It's not just an NCR problem. It's not just this Punjab, Haryana, Delhi, UP problem. It is a problem up till Patna, up to Calcutta, possibly in several places in the northeast also, right down to Bangalore uh, and Maharashtra, Gujarat. So, for instance, the CPCP last month in September reported that SO2, for instance, had gone up. The levels had increased during the lockdown compared to 2019. Now, with the lockdown cutting down pollution pretty much all across the IGP, if it's going up in places like Bangalore, Singrauli, and I think it was in Calcutta also, Kolkata, the fact is that, the air pollution crisis is much more severe than we think, and beyond just this Delhi regions, beyond just the
Right.
northern regions. So
Yeah.
use this chance, use this to give it a mandate much larger than the IGP, and see where we go with that, because I think that's really
Yeah.
to
Yeah. So
take
I
it
think,
out of
yeah.
Delhi.
Yeah, Chetan, what you're saying is that it's been Delhi centric. It's almost like the rest of the country doesn't have lungs. So that, is a huge problem as well. How about the fact, I don't know if anybody noticed, but Ashok Gehlot, the Chief Minister of Rajasthan, yes, day before introduced, made an announcement that they would not allow the burning of firecrackers. Would you say that it's strong announcements like that come straight from the top is what is needed for the national capital region? And there was that hope that this ordinance would do something like that.
Absolutely. I think without, I mean, one part of the pragmatism is that without the courts and without the top political leadership, there's nothing that can really be achieved. We might sort of scream and shout from the rooftops as much as possible, but unless there's decisive political action like this, and I think it was a brilliant step, there won't be much headway. So I would imagine that, groups have to work, various people have to work with the political leadership, with the courts, to see, how best we can progress on this. And Gehlot's step was fantastic. The Delhi government is not going to do that. They've pretty much made that clear today.
Right, right. So I think we've heard Shibani, we've heard Chetan. Ritwik, if we can have you join the conversation now, I assume you've managed to make your way out of traffic and you are with us. Ritwik, if you can shed some light on whether you think that the new air ordinance, I remember that I do recall your tweet where you said old wine in a new bottle. So are you still pessimistic, or do you feel that this new air ordinance is a step forward?
Sorry for joining late, Bahar. I'm not really, what I may be saying may have been repeated, but my view is very clear. It's like we are repeating the same mistakes that we have done 22 years back. There's the issue is whether this particular ordinance, whether it'll bring about change. Well, you don't need to see what will happen, because the only way to look at it is what has happened with EPCA. It is 90% replica of EPCA. The only difference is that it has the principal secretaries or the chief secretaries and the additional or the environment secretaries of other states as member of it. Otherwise, it's exactly the same. So since 22 years, nothing really has happened. And also we must keep in mind that whatever little happened because of EPCA was because of the reports that it submitted to the Supreme Court. Right, so it would be answerable, and it would report to the Supreme Court, which would lead to the orders of the Supreme Court, whether it is on all the BS6 to transport to all. Even that power and that arrangement does not exist so far as the new body is concerned. So it is a completely executive driven, controlled body and nothing beyond, and it does not have even the oversight of the Supreme Court. So minus that, so it is
But
even,
Ritwik, the fact that it has been given the final jurisdiction, Shibani was just telling us that it has exclusive jurisdiction now. The fact that it's considered now the final authority, are these not steps in the right direction?
so the final authority will be the central government. Right, it is as powerful and as weak as whatever the central government wants. So it says that in terms of directions and all, the ultimate authority will still be the Ministry of Environment and Forest. And ultimately, if you look at it, it's an executive body. It is created by the executive in all its way in terms of its composition. And whenever there is a problem, it is the central government that will be having the superior powers.
Okay, let's just take the next, I would say, just 2-3 minutes, because to talk about EPCA, because I feel we haven't spoken about EPCA enough. What was the problem with EPCA? Why was it not being able to achieve its objectives? And what would you say needed to be done? And Shibani, I'd like to draw you in as well, just from an institutional point of view, because from CPR also, we had Navroz, who was part of EPCA. So were, the NGO members not able to play a significant role in EPCA? Were their powers clipped? So I'll ask Shibani for you to weigh in on that. But first, Ritwik, speak to us about the functioning of EPCA and where you think it did well and where it was lacking.
As I said, EPCA's success would be one in terms of certain recommendations that it gave to the Supreme Court, which led to certain orders, whether, in respect of dirty fuel, whether it's respect of transportation. Those were definitely areas where EPCA made a difference. But I think what is there and what we have to understand is, well, as part of life, we did a very detailed analysis 2 years back, right, of a performance audit of EPCA. And what I felt that as civil society groups, we have been silent about EPCA's performance for very long. And I can still share, at least with your background, that, I had a tough time even convincing journalists in mainstream media that, please show to the public the poor performance of EPCA. And no one was willing to publish that. And there
why do you think, what was the reason for that? Why do you think
I don't know,
media did
I
not
think
want to talk about the role of EPCA?
I still don't know. I still have difficulty, understanding the problem that is there, right? And so therefore, I have a serious issue with regard to EPCA's performance. Let's look at it first. From 1998, EPCA had the power to file complaints against anyone who is violating the provisions of the Air Act and Water Act. Right? It had the power to file a complaint before a magistrate. In 22 years, it did not file a single complaint, number one. Second, EPCA had the power to redress public grievances by citizens who file complaints. EPCA has no format for receiving complaints or filing complaints. Forget about that. In 22 years, EPCA could not even get an office in place. On the website, it shows it's Arjun Nagar in CPCB. You go to Arjun Nagar, they say, well, you go to India Habitat Center, which is Mr. Bhurelal's office. Yes. And then you file a complaint and you get a response from the Center for Science and Environment. So public is completely lost now in it. So it was serious problem with regard to functioning. You had all the secretaries of all the Delhi government's bodies as member. Obviously, they will not file a case against themselves. In 2018, right, and I'll be very frank, pardon me for saying it, but 2018 was when the reform took place, where they included some of the best brains, right, to be part of EPCA. It was Delhi University, Jawaharlal Nehru University, IIT Delhi, Center for Policy Research, CEW, TERI, Shakti, right, all of it, you name it. And in 2 years, we have, looked at the minutes of the meeting, and it shows a dismal level of participation. In fact, with despite being critical of the role, it is only CSE that participated in every single meeting.
Right. So and what you're saying to me, Ritwik, is that even civil society did not play its role as far as EPCA was concerned.
Just give me 1 minute more. And then see, about 8 months back, EPCA said that, we'll do a study of hotspots of pollution. So hotspots for pollution was studied, and it was divided among all the civil society groups to do a study on hotspot. The only member of EPCA who did a study of hotspot was Mr. Vishnu Mathur of the Society for Indian Automobile Manufacturers. And the minutes says that despite repeated requests, no civil society group, including the universities, bothered to go in to do a study of pollution hotspot. Right. And lastly, my last point is, in October last year, EPCA gave a report to the Supreme Court, endorsed by all the members, right, stating that the pollution level has actually come down in the last 10 years in Delhi, largely because of the super work that was done by EPCA. Now, I said, what is the, if you actually improve the air quality, we don't have a crisis at all.
Okay. Okay, I think we've dissected the role of EPCA enough. Shibani, if you would like to give some quick comments before we move on?
Sure. Bahar, first I must say that Dr. Navroz Dubash was the one who was appointed professor at Center for Policy Research and not me, and I really shouldn't speak for him and his kind of engagement with the EPCA.
Fair enough. All right.
Yes. Yeah, so I don't want to speak.
Okay, all right. Point taken.
But I think some of the points that Ritwick just made were, I mean, in a sense, asking the question and answering that, they didn't have the members were all part-time members, and that's the point I made earlier. And they did not have an office, they did not have staff, they didn't have full-time members. I think those were, among many other issues, I think critical to the failure of at least the statutory mandate of EPCA. I mean, I'm not going to say at least what was expected from it, including the complaint mechanism. So that's where I'll leave it for now.
Okay. So we've got at least 45 people I can see are logged on right now, and there's all sorts of people, citizen groups, there's scientists. Brikesh, I think before we take like a final round of comments from our panel, it would be only fair for the people who logged on to get a chance to speak. So with your permission, can I go ahead and do that?